North Korea has built an enormous beach resort designed to welcome thousands of holidaymakers. There are hotels, water parks, shopping areas, and kilometers of sandy coastline. There is just one problem. Most of the world isn't allowed to visit. It is one of the strangest contradictions in modern North Korea. A government famous for isolation has spent years constructing tourist attractions that depend, at least partly, on outsiders arriving. And the story of Wonsan-Kalma reveals something much bigger about Kim Jong-un's vision for his country. Because this isn't North Korea's first attempt to build its way into becoming a tourist destination. Subscribe to Uncovering North Korea, because behind the beaches and luxury hotels is a fascinating story about ambition, isolation, and some of the most unusual development projects anywhere in the world. On North Korea's eastern coastline sits Wonsan-Kalma. The development stretches along a sandy peninsula beside the Sea of Japan, known in Korea as the East Sea. It was conceived as a major tourism center, with hotels, entertainment facilities, and a beachfront capable of accommodating large numbers of visitors. Kim Jong-un personally promoted the project. The idea itself was remarkable. North Korea wanted to create something resembling an international seaside destination inside one of the world's most tightly controlled states. Reports have even suggested that North Korean officials studied foreign holiday resorts, including Spain's famous tourist destination of Benidorm, while developing their plans. But building a resort and filling it with tourists are two completely different challenges. And that is where the story becomes much more complicated. For years, foreign tourism provided North Korea with a small but visible connection to the outside world. Before the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of visitors entered the country annually, overwhelmingly from neighboring China. In 2019, the total was estimated at roughly 350,000. Western tourists represented only a fraction of that number. Those who did visit normally traveled on organized tours. Their movements were restricted, itineraries were arranged in advance, and guides accompanied them. Yet tourism offered something unusual. Foreigners could see selected parts of a country that remains inaccessible to most outsiders, while North Korea received foreign currency and an opportunity to present a carefully managed image of itself. Then the pandemic changed everything. North Korea sealed its borders in early 2020. Tourism effectively disappeared. What initially appeared to be an emergency public health measure became something much longer lasting. Years passed, and while many countries reopened, North Korea remained extraordinarily difficult for international tourists to enter. There was a brief sign of change in February 2025, when some foreign visitors were once again permitted to enter. But the reopening was short-lived, and wider international tourism was suspended again within weeks. That creates the central mystery surrounding Wonsan-Kalma. Why build a huge tourist complex when almost nobody from overseas can actually use it? Russia provides part of the answer. Relations between Moscow and Pyongyang have become considerably closer, and Russian travelers have been among the very few foreign tourists able to visit North Korea. But the numbers remain modest. Only around 3,600 Russian visitors reportedly traveled to North Korea during the first half of 2026. For a country attempting to create a major international tourism industry, that is tiny. But that's only part of the story. Wonsan-Kalma may not depend entirely on foreigners. North Korea has its own relatively affluent urban population, particularly among people connected to Pyongyang's political, commercial, and professional elite. Domestic groups can also be sent to resorts through workplaces, universities, and state organizations. That means an apparently empty international resort might still serve a purpose inside the country. And Wonsan-Kalma isn't the first enormous North Korean project whose economic logic has puzzled outsiders. Look across Pyongyang's skyline, and one building is almost impossible to miss. The Ryugyong Hotel. Construction began in 1987. Designed as a gigantic pyramid, rising more than 100 stories above the capital, it was supposed to become one of the tallest hotels on Earth. Instead, construction stalled. For years, the unfinished concrete structure dominated Pyongyang, becoming perhaps the world's most famous unoccupied hotel. Its exterior was eventually covered in glass, dramatically changing its appearance. But decades after construction began, it has still never operated as the conventional international hotel originally imagined. And there is another example. Masikryong Ski Resort. Opened under Kim Jong-un, the complex represented another attempt to demonstrate that North Korea could create modern leisure infrastructure. It even briefly became connected with one of the most optimistic moments in recent Korean relations. Ahead of the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea, athletes from North and South trained together at Masikryong. For a moment, sport appeared capable of providing a bridge between two governments technically still at war. That atmosphere didn't last. Relations deteriorated again. Today, the political relationship between Pyongyang and Seoul is dramatically more hostile. And this reveals something important about North Korean tourism. These resorts aren't simply businesses. They can also function as symbols. A modern ski resort demonstrates development. A huge beach complex projects prosperity. A futuristic hotel transforms a skyline. Whether those projects would make commercial sense in London, Seoul, or Tokyo isn't necessarily the only calculation being made. In a highly centralized system, construction can have political and propaganda value alongside its economic purpose. But Wonsan-Kalma still faces an unavoidable problem. International tourism requires international tourists, and there appears to be continuing demand. Tour operators specializing in North Korea say potential visitors still inquire about traveling there. Some are experienced travelers attempting to visit every recognized country in the world. Others are simply fascinated by a place that remains almost completely inaccessible. Yet nobody can say with certainty when widespread tourism will return. And even if the border eventually opens, visiting North Korea is unlike taking an ordinary holiday. Foreign governments maintain serious travel warnings. Visitors face strict laws and extensive restrictions, and the consequences of violating North Korean rules can be severe. The case of American student Otto Warmbier remains the starkest warning. Warmbier was detained during a trip to North Korea in 2016 and accused of attempting to remove a propaganda poster. He was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. He returned to the United States in 2017 in a state of unresponsive wakefulness and died days later. That case fundamentally changed perceptions of North Korean tourism, particularly in the United States. And yet, the fascination hasn't disappeared. Perhaps that is the strangest element of this entire story. North Korea wants to control what outsiders see, while simultaneously building attractions designed to bring outsiders inside. It wants the economic possibilities of tourism without surrendering the extraordinary level of control that defines the state. Wonsan-Kalma therefore represents far more than a beach holiday. It represents the contradiction at the center of Kim Jong-un's tourism experiment. Hotels can be constructed, beaches can be prepared, water parks can be opened, but creating an international destination requires something concrete cannot provide: openness. And until North Korea decides how much of that it is prepared to allow, its enormous tourism ambitions may remain exactly where they are today, waiting behind a closed border. If you want to uncover more stories hidden behind one of the world's most secretive regimes, subscribe to Uncovering North Korea.